Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to August 9th special City Council meeting. Specific purpose for tonight's meeting is for the mayor to present to the council and the public his 2017 budget. And if you'd all stand with me, Alderman Richie Nordstrom is going to deliver a prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, hallowed is your name. Bless this mayor and council. Bless the staff and citizens of the city of Rapid City. Bless the decisions we are about to make with the monies of the citizens and the city of Rapid City. Bless those who serve and protect our citizens and country. Bless those who are in need of healing hearts, minds, and bodies. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
The pledge allegiance
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to Mayor Allender, we've had a little bit of chance to visit, and he's not sure if his presentation is going to take 1 hour or 3 hours, but he has asked that as he gives his presentation that we not ask questions during it, and we wait till the end of his presentation to ask him questions, and then he will be handing out to everybody a handout which has all of his slides and such. And we'll have some other things to discuss after his presentation. So with that, Mayor Allender, I'll turn the floor to you.
Thank you. So here's the situation is, this is 2017 budget. Last year, when I did the budget address, I was presenting former Mayor Quaker's budget to you. Now I've had a whole year to be responsible for this budget. And so that's the bottom line here, is that I'm responsible for what I'm about to present to you. In terms of making tough decisions, judgments as far as departments, staff, other entities, and so on, I've made those. I have not set anyone else up to make those decisions for me. Now, at the end of this presentation, I view this as the handoff of the budget to the City Council. It's your budget. And it's important, I think, for the process that you take ownership of it and you enlist the help of me, and I'll enlist the help of city staff to get all the questions, all the data, all the research that you may want in order to understand and become comfortable with this budget or some version of it that you may ultimately approve. This is a good part of the democratic process. You, aldermen, represent the entirety of our community. Registered voters or not. You are the representatives. So when it comes time for you to change something that I've put in the budget or not put in the budget, I want you to know that that's within your authority, and you should not feel like this is adversarial. I don't feel like it's adversarial. It doesn't need to be. But I think it's your duty to do what's best collectively for all of us. So, having said that, I will try to make this work. Yes. I have a number of slides in this presentation that really violate every PowerPoint rule you've ever heard. Too much text, too close together, too small. And the reason I'm showing you some of those slides is to show you what you're going to get following this meeting, and to show you the numbers that I'm working from, and to show you the way that I am displaying these numbers. It's not necessarily, and you'll see by the first couple slides, it's not necessarily for you to try to digest all at once. I've spent months on this budget. There is too much there to quickly digest, and so I apologize for all of the slides and all of the busyness in the slides. So we'll go on to the first one, which is the general fund. Now here's something that's perhaps a little different. First of all, as far as past presentations go, it's hard to know exactly what each mayor each year did and how they derived where they drive their numbers from. These particular general fund numbers are all displayed without interdepartmental charges. So for example, the city attorney's office at $761,000, there's $500,000 interdepartmental charge there. So the burden to the general fund for the attorney's office is really $260,000. So what I'm showing you the full cost, because it's the actual cost of doing business. When we get to the enterprise funds, I'm doing just the opposite. I'm showing them with the interdepartmental charges because that is the true cost of doing business. So here's the general fund displayed in that manner. I'll have some slides for the revenue sources and a little different explanation as we go along there. But you see here the revenue on one side and the expected expenses on the other. Note for a later slide that we are proposing using $3,461,875 out of undesignated cash to balance this budget. That's going to become important towards the end of this presentation when I show you the history of that and present some, perhaps some alternatives or some things to maybe get your ideas on the subject as well. So the total general fund request, $62,344,819. Start with the mayor's office. The mayor's office, we split the mayor and council organizational code in the budget starting in 2017. So currently it's mayor council org code. 17 it'll be just mayor. So we've taken $215,533 out of there. We've moved a couple other things. Lifeways was a subsidy that was under the mayor's office, and it doesn't need to be there. We've moved that out. We moved all the council-related costs to their own cost center in the amount of $217,190. So the mayor's office budget, $477,676. City council. I itemize these items on this slide so that you can just have a general understanding about what it is we moved out of the mayor and council budget and put just in the council budget. So you have a list of them right here. I think you have a good share of the money to be able to operate as a council. Contingency fund is at $50,000. Historically, that's been as high as $100,000. In 2016, it's $50,000, and it's proposed as $50,000 in 17. Community resources. That is Jeff Barbier's department. He has these divisions or these functions within that department. Communications, global information system is GIS. Code enforcement, which also includes sign code enforcement. Community development, human resources, and IT. So I've given you an idea what each of those has, how each of those have increased over the last, from the 2016 request. And so we'll move on. City attorney is down 5.9%, which is something else to note. Why is it down? Well, they took out some professional services that weren't being used. They were a little over budgeted there. Also a little over budgeted in the outside legal counsel area, but a senior employee retired. Paralegal retired in the city attorney's office. And those things just drove this budget down 5.9%. Relatively small budget in the scheme of all the other departments, but one senior employee made a big difference. Public Works. To me, the most complicated department, the widest reach within the community, and here are those costs. Now, for the Public Works Administration increase, wages and overtime was increased and related benefits, totaling an increase of $63,000 from 16 to 17, and that results in a 6.8% increase. The equipment maintenance increase, a new mechanic, related benefits, increases in computers, a big increase in utilities for a total increase of $64,000. And another important point to keep in mind for later on in the presentation, for street cleaning, their large increase of 18.2% really, for the most part, boils down to one line in their budget, and that is equipment. There's a piece of equipment in street cleaning budgeted for $275,000 that, with the exception of 2016, is budgeted for as far back as our printout went, I think 2011. This ballpark expense for a piece of equipment was budgeted every year but 16. So when it's 0 in 16 and back to $275,000 for 17, it shows it as an 18% increase. One of the points I'll be making later is smoothing out these equipment purchases so that they're more predictable. So total public works up 2%. Public Works has two new full-time equivalent requests, FTE requests. And those are for two Public Works engineering techs. Those are essentially engineering inspectors that will be used on capital improvements projects in place of consultant fees. Dale Tech has done the math, he's done the research on this, he's willing to share it. He is projecting a savings of $400,000 in 2017 by hiring these two Public Works engineering techs. Police Department. This year, police and fire look radically different than they have in the past, to an extent sparked by our move to priority-based budgeting. But what you see here on the police department slide are a couple of dozen new organizational codes, and those are budgeting codes. So prior to this, there was one budget code, which had a total in it, and so now we have close to 2 dozen. And so the only comparison I can give you over 16 to today is a total picture of how much the PD is up. But this gives you an idea what each function or each emphasis within that department costs. Let's see, for abbreviation purposes, let's go down on the left-hand column, patrol investigations. Internet crimes against children is ICAC. Those are the detectives that investigate child pornography. UNET is the Unified Narcotics Enforcement Team, which is staffed with city, county, state, and federal drug enforcement officers who all work together in the same office on the same function. That's our contribution of manpower. Next, school liaison. School liaison is a good example. So we have police officers in every school. Between us and the sheriff's department, we have police officers in every middle school and every high school in the county. And the city's cost is $463,000. But what this budget doesn't show is the revenue side of it. And we receive a reimbursement from the schools that is 50% of the wages and benefits for 9 months. So in other words, 5/8 of this figure is reimbursed to the city. So none of these slides I'm going to show you in the general fund show anything to do with revenue. Next is the compliance office, liquor stings, sex offender registration, and so on. Next is the cultural committee, the chief's cultural advisor and committee. Let's see, right-hand column, special ops, about halfway down. That is sort of everything that doesn't fit under one of the other divisions, that is fleet maintenance and all of the ancillary functions of the department. And then air LEOs, air law enforcement officers, they work at the airport. There's a reimbursement from the Transportation Safety Administration for the majority of this, but $163,000 for part-time employees, part-time police officers to secure the airport. Crossing guards, K-9 program, and then down at the bottom, community service officers. Those are alternatives to police officers. They drive around in the differently marked pickup trucks or SUV, and they handle the non-emergency type calls to keep the load off of the police officers. I explained some of those things because I just realized I have too many abbreviations on there, but anyway, so that's it. Police Department total $14,807,372, which is an increase of 0.7%. There are 3 requests for FTEs from the police this year. One police chemist, which they have been asking for a couple of years. There has been a substantial increase in drug activity, drug arrests, drug overdoses, and so on. The governor just wrote a column about it. State drug arrests are up 40%, largely due to methamphetamine, and they have a soon-to-retire chemist, well, soon, relatively soon, sometime in the next year or 2 or perhaps 3, but they are overrun, and there's revenue associated with this chemist position. The police department does drug testing for the region for a fee. They also provide expert witness testimony and those type of things. So there's some offset to that. 2 police officers, and for 2017, there's been no additional money added into the police budget for these 3 employees. Because of their opening and hiring cycles, they will go a good part of the year having several openings. And then they will, in other words, not spend that cash at that time, and then they will fill those openings. And so for 2017, there's enough of that available to bring these folks on. So they won't go into the budget as an additional expense until 2018. Fire department also split up into several organizational codes, just not as many. This is pretty logical breakup here. We get to see the expense of all of the fire stations plus public education and administration for a total budget of $9,914,000, or up 1.7%. Community planning. By the way, we've narrowed community planning director candidates down for 3 interviews, which we are scheduling toward the end of August, and I'll be contacting the council for 1 or 2 volunteers to be on that interview panel, and then we'll have staff on there as well. But things are shaping up there in that director search. The Development Service Center consists of current planning and building services. Transportation planning, historic preservation is under community planning, and air quality. So the total budget of $2.3 million plus for increase of 3.2%. Parks and Recreation. There's nothing tricky about these numbers. These are parks, swim centers, urban forestry is in there, ice arena. And so this is the general fund portion of their request. For 9.8%. That's a pretty good increase. Here's why. First of all, we transferred the fireworks display budget from the fire department to Parks and Recreation. That's one thing. We have the opening of Horseman Pool. There's a needed temporary wage increase at Parkview and Sioux Park Pool of 33% to get in line with what's actually being spent to staff those pools. They had been under budgeting for some time, and now they're up to what is needed. Also, janitor, chemical, and a major increase in temporary wages at the swim center as well. Parks has increases, notable increases in supplies, utilities, and these two FTE requests. Park maintenance workers, the first one. These are the folks that take care of landscaping and other general parks maintenance duties. And as you drive home tonight, well, it'll probably be dark, unfortunately, but tomorrow you'll see all of the medians, all of the landscaping around approaches near the interstate. You'll see that we are spreading the park system out far and wide across this community. They are a little bit in trouble as far as keeping up with the demand. So they're asking for a parks maintenance worker. They're also asking for an electrician. For years and years, the parks have been borrowing the Public Works electrician. And these are electrical service upgrades, things of that nature at the parks, at the shelters, the band shell, the events, and so on. And they've gotten to the point where both Parks and Public Works agree it's time to give Public Works back their electrician and put one in Parks and Rec. Library. The library shows these two budgets, library and rural library. And the only reason I'm bringing it up in that language is because that's the way it appears on the official budget spreadsheet, the official finance documents as rural library. So this $412,000 is the amount of the county payment to the city library. So they have articulated costs within the library that are associated with that payment, and so they have wages and benefits and some other things that total $412 in a separate organizational code, and so that's why it appears that way. So there's matching revenue on the other side to even that out. But on paper, the total library budget, $3,334,000, slight decrease of 0.08%. Finance department, we have administration, accounts payable and receivable, and parking lot and area. Parking lot and area is the fund where we receive revenue for leased parking, and this is the administration cost for that. So total finance, $1.367 million, 2.3% increase. Government buildings is a curious one. So I put them together in this category on this presentation, but they won't appear this way exactly on the official budget document. But this is what we are paying to maintain government buildings. The Dahl Fine Arts and the Journey Museum, those are run by those entities. City Hall maintenance is our agreement with the city schools on what we pay for maintenance. We're going to investigate in the coming months whether it would be in our interest to change over the administration of that maintenance from the schools to the city. We're not sure about that yet. The other category is insurance for other scattered city buildings, such as the one we bought recently on North Street and North 8th. So just a little bit of insurance on there. $886,000 in government building needed. Now this is the subsidies and community investments. It's called subsidies on some documents. It's called community investments in the ordinance. And there are two ways that this display on the official document. So I'm going to show you two slides of them. These items are currently listed separately on the budget documents. So if you're thumbing through there, you will see these as their own thing. The Black Hills Council of Local Governments, something that we've belonged to for many years. It's a West River Economic Development resource for research, marketing, and recruiting. They're in support of city government. Emergency Services Dispatch, $1.356 million. Emergency Management, and I've included the $22,000 or whatever dollars it is for search and rescue, for a total of $132,945. Humane Society with an asterisk. Humane Society, with the busyness of the budget preparation, I failed to negotiate the contract with the Humane Society. I had an invitation to do so months ago when we attended a presentation at the Humane Society. I still have the booklet they handed out, but I'd failed to negotiate with them. So we're putting them in at last year's contract price and sent out an invitation for them to come in and negotiate the contract. I think we're just a little off on what we think about the contract, but those negotiations will be held between the board chair and whoever she wishes to have with her, and the city attorney and the finance officer. And that should be resolved by the end of the year. Detox, $513,000, that's up a little bit. And you know, they are expecting to move into a new building. There's a couple extra costs for operations there. And then this item seen separately in there under advertising for $34,000, and this is essentially what we pay the chamber to market the city. That's been the same every year. Here's the other category of community investments. These are all listed under subsidies, which is under Org Code 621 on the official document. Performing Arts Center at $36,100. Allied Arts, $102,000. Now that's $102,000 that then they turn around and contribute to many other arts-related organizations out of that. Lifeways is essentially the school's only presence for drug and alcohol prevention. We have funded those for a number of years. Senior Citizen Center, I have to be honest and admit to you that I don't know what the logic is behind the differing amounts here or how we got to those. I just simply put in the same amounts as last year. I've had no contact with the Senior Citizen Center. Working Against Violence Incorporated, I took that item out of the police department budget and put it in these community investments where I think it belongs, and that's up a small percentage to $113,558. And so here's the item now that's new. This is the Cornerstone Rescue Mission for $250,000. I am aware that the Cornerstone Rescue Mission has lost revenue of $250,000 or $200 and some thousand this year, and another expected $200,000 for a total lost revenue of $450,000. This has caused them to lay off several staff and pull back on services. So this is different, in my opinion, from contributing to just another nonprofit. In fact, the Cornerstone Rescue Mission and Working Against Violence have a lot in common. This is a service, in my opinion, that if the city would have the interest, the resources, the needed specialty to do so, I think we would be compelled to do this. I have been involved with the homeless condition in Rapid City for a long time, and I can tell you anecdotally that the most expensive option for dealing with the homeless is ignoring it. And I feel like, aside from a small remodel in the past, I believe the largest contribution that the city has made to the Cornerstone Rescue Mission is $6,000 or $10,000. And I know in the late 80s, we leased the building to them, and then they bought it for $1, and I think it's possible they got their money's worth out of the building. They've had to struggle to keep in that building and to keep their operation going. So I think it is the right thing to do for the city to step up and be a partner in the treatment and the fight against homelessness. So obviously this is part of a bigger picture with what you've heard about collective impact and so on and so forth. So we are walking this thin line, wondering if we're stepping off to the left or the right on what our responsibility is as a community and as a government. And that's a hard call. That's a judgment call in the end. But we currently incur expenses in reacting to the homeless problem with police, fire, indigent health care, and so on and so forth. The cost to the community, the documented cost to the community for the most chronic of offenders is around $35,000 per person per year. So there's no doubt Rapid City's paying out a ton of money for this issue. I want us to pay it out proactively. And I received a letter from them telling us what it would do for them to have a greater contribution, and so that's my request, $250,000. Now, along the same lines, and I'm going to link this to homelessness. I'm going to link it also to workforce development, to a vibrant community in the future. We have an education, I don't want to say this to offend the school. I don't mean this as an offense to the school. We have an education problem. We have a results problem in Rapid City. We have very low attendance rates. We have low graduation rates. And those things are coming back every day to hurt us. And so what, if anything, can the city do? Well, I believe one of the things we can do, one of the things is the free transportation that you recently authorized. That will be one more thing that can do to help get kids to school. But the Early Childhood Connections, this is a preschool program. You might have heard of this, you might have heard of the term Starting Strong. This is a program that preps kids for school. There is documented evidence that the children who do not read at the third grade level while they're in the third grade have a heightened chance of not making it in life as far as their career, their future education, their success, their burden on the community. There's a higher incidence of the pathway to prison and social services, welfare, and all that sort of thing. So what can be done? And we talk a lot, I'll probably get on this again when we're talking about economic development, but we talk about economic development, workforce development, and so on. Well, we cannot take an adult who has a 7th grade reading level and 7th grade social skills and turn him into a responsible adult. So the system, including us, not just made up of us, but including us, the community system, has to do something to give folks the best chance, and we can measure that through the graduation rates and the type of jobs, the type of available employees that we have at any given time. So I think an investment into Early Childhood Connections is the right thing. This will offer a great amount of scholarships for kids to get in this preschool education program. Now the contingencies of $102,000, that is the figure that traditionally is handed out to other nonprofits by the Community Investments Committee. At the end of the presentation, I'll have a recommendation on that, but I simply rolled the number over from 16 to 17. I have some strong feelings about it, how we give that out, and I'll probably touch on them. So this is the subsidies and community investments. Now, economic development. Our primary economic development partner is the Rapid City Economic Development Partnership. And when I started here a year ago, I was attending at least 4 different organization meetings on economic development. I heard the same buzzwords, the same things over and over, and saw essentially the same progress from all of them. The progress is mostly measured in those meetings. It was quite frustrating for an outsider coming in to see how everyone was working. So the partnership has traditionally received a gift or payment from the city of $275,000. So I'm recommending this year that we up that payment to $400,000. Now this is not actually more money out of the bank, it is more money to them, but we have a couple of other sources for that money. One of them is that Black Hills Vision. We will not be funding Black Hills Vision this year. Black Hills Vision is going to stay essentially idle for several more months or a year, and will ultimately go away. We will put, I'm asking to put those resources into the partnership. The other thing is the Ellsworth Task Force. We have funded the task force for a long time. We're recommending not funding in 2017. That resource, those funds are contained in this $400,000. So what will happen with that? The partnership wants to hire a workforce development specialist, someone who will lead the charge to finally put some action to what we always talk about, and that is workforce development. Most of us who say this don't even know what it means. How do you develop someone for the workforce, and what's the span of the development cycle, and so on and so forth. It's a good talking point, but I think that we have had too little action on that. So they want to hire this workforce development specialist. Secondly, they want to hire an investor relations person. So their goal is to double the amount of private contributions that go to the partnership right now. They're not solely funded by us. They have other sources, and so they want to become more self-sufficient. So also, and I think the most exciting thing of all this is that the partnership has been doing research for some time and wants to launch the economic gardening incentive in Rapid City. Now, economic gardening is something that's being done in other places, and the basic explanation is this. Traditionally, economic development people look to the outside and they try to lure in businesses to come and plant in Rapid City. And I believe that was probably a very effective tool in the days before the internet. You would send a packet, you would do a site visit, and you would try to get them to come out here for a tour. Today, everything has changed. Really, the results are minimal. The big companies, the companies that we want, are going to choose the best site based on what is best for them. Well, we would stand here all day long and say, well, look at the Black Hills, and look at these things we have, and look at the friendly, clean city, and we would do all these things, and they would politely say, of course, but we've looked at 50 other cities, and we're taking all those things into consideration. So the economic gardening does this. It turns our attention inward. From looking for that outside company to come in and create 6 jobs with a promise of 10 more in 3 years, we turn inward and we start incentivizing our existing businesses in Rapid City to expand, to become the best they can be, to improve the overall business environment in Rapid City so that we naturally become attractive to a big employer or an important employer that we may want to lure here. We lure them because we are good, not because we're trying to look good. As it is now, I mean, the site visits and begging people to come here is sort of like going on a first date. You only show them the best side of yourself. Well, they have the ability now to see inside with the internet and all of the data available, and so we should, I want us to quit fooling ourselves and turn inward and help our local business community be as good as they can. Now also, in a related economic development note, we now have access to a PhD economist through the Black Hills Knowledge Network. We've paid a small fee to do a search with a number of other partners, to do a search and to narrow down the candidates and to select one. And so the network now has an economist at their disposal that we can use for a fee. General projections, presentations, things like that are typical business. However, analysis and detailed strategy building and so on will come at a fee, and that is a very good option for us. So that's economic development. Here's a one-time thing, and this is the International Computer Programming Competition, which will be held in Rapid City in May 2017. This is an international competition. People who are computer programmers refer to this as the just as important as the Olympics. This is the Computer Programming Olympics. I can't say off the top of my head when the last time this competition was purposely held, planned to be held in the United States. Last year, or in 2016, it was in Thailand. A couple of years ago, it was in Orlando, and that's because the city that they had planned to have it in overseas had become politically unstable, and so they went to their number 2 venue, which was Orlando. This is a huge event. We are working with Dr. Gowan and this whole team of people from Hewlett-Packard and other vendors that are here on the team, and this will be a very big event. They have bought out all of the downtown hotels. There will be competitions over, I think, 4 days, and someone will win. School of Mines has a number of people in this competition. This whole process, and they have the data to back it up, will generate 1 billion press impressions for Rapid City. 1 billion press impressions, which can single-handedly wipe out every other Google search that you currently find about Rapid City. I mean, 1 billion is something we don't understand in terms of press impressions. I mean, it's hard to understand, I should say that, okay? This is a big deal for Rapid City. This will result, if this competition treats our community like it treats every other location, this competition will result in computer companies, programmers, and related companies looking at Rapid City for a new home. People will look to live here. We will get more attention worldwide than we have received from any other single event. Maybe from any other 100 events, I don't know. But this is a big deal. So near a year ago, I pledged $50,000 on behalf of the city. One of the things that they will have to do is they're going to update all of the cable and network infrastructure at the Civic Center. There's a number of other things that have to be done to keep this competition up and running and to keep everyone connected and so on. And when they leave, all of that stays behind. So this is a minimal, relatively minimal investment in securing and keeping and making the best out of that competition. So here's some line graphs on our revenue from 2012 to 2017. Now 2016 and 17 are both projected numbers. We have half a year on 16. We've tweaked a little bit on some of these based on that, but 16, 17 are mostly projections. So we see this is a nice little graph. We're going up, and it looks fairly dramatic, but we're going from 13,500,000 in 2012 to just over $15.5 million projected in 2017. So this is property tax, and this is the increase in this is related to more buildings, more taxable houses, businesses, and so on. Sales tax revenue, another good-looking graph. From 2012, just over 22 million to about 26.5 million in 2017. This is fairly consistently up. 2016 estimate was a little bit down the first half of the year. It's been adjusted, and so it's up a little more than we'd originally thought. So I've just showed you now the sales tax revenue, and I'll still tell you that there's data out there that suggests that Rapid City is still behind the rest of the state in their sales tax increases. The gross sales in Rapid City have a relatively flat trend compared to an upward trend in the rest of the state. So we have to find out what all of our options are to stimulate sales tax in Rapid City. So we can say shop local and we can do all of that, but we are competing with the internet. And the internet, we're also in a time when it's easier and perhaps more practical to sit on your couch, order a bunch of stuff through Amazon, and have it show up in a few days, and you never have to leave your house. That's very easy and very convenient. Free shipping. So for years, as the internet has become, the internet's starting to be a thing now. It's starting to become more used every day. Well, before we competed with guilt, we said, shops, support your local shops. And so that time has passed. I don't think that's working anymore. I think we may have to help. I wouldn't say lead, because no business should take its business advice from the government, but we should help. Try to get local businesses to understand that they are in competition with internet-based businesses. They may have to do an internet storefront and free delivery and price reductions and dropping overhead, and they have to find a way to compete online. But we will not get sales tax from Amazon.com until they build a building in Rapid City, or in case we push through some law that will be challenged over and over to gain the tax on those goods. So sales tax, I say, although this graph looks pretty good, I think it's not rising as much as it could or should. These are other taxes, and this includes delinquent property taxes, motor vehicle licenses, bank franchise tax, cable TV and business tax, liquor tax, and some other miscellaneous taxes. Now, I can't explain the dip in 2016 or the projected dip in 2016, but that revenue is projected to be about $3.3 million in 17. Intergovernmental or grant revenue, this is income from places like the TSA for security, transportation planning, a reentry grant, a county payment for a global information system, hazmat payment from the county, dive team payment, the transit system, historic preservation, air quality, Department of Justice policing grants, FEMA, Bureau of Land Management. In 2014 received the upward trend here from 13 to 14 is the $1.47 million we received from FEMA for Winter Storm Atlas. In 2015, we received a surface transportation project grant for $6.4 million for a project that hadn't been done yet. So that was a payment in advance, and now the state has stopped those advance payments and they're going to pay annually. So as time goes on, we'll see this graph smooth out, and it'll probably remain around that $3 million point. Permits and licenses, building permits, sign permits, lottery, liquor license, air quality, and other miscellaneous, security license, taxi, all those types of things. Peak in 13 and now back on an upward trend going into 17. Sales of goods and services. This is revenue from various sources. Our crime lab, drug seizures, false alarms, Pennington County housing, the Civic Center reimbursement for security, recreation facilities, swimming, ice arena, school liaison reimbursement, transit fares and advertising at transit, and so on. So we're going up there, realizing, of course, that the increase here is, $500,000 over the last couple of years, but it is going in the right direction. Interest, rent, and property sale, kind of an erratic grant up to 14, or erratic chart. Interest on CIP, property, rent, and sale. You'll find this in the official budget documents under use of money and property, and so on. But we're going down a little bit, about $440,000 in 17. Okay, now I'm going to define a couple things for you, just so that when I'm talking about these on the next slides, that we're all going to generally understand. And I know that the public really probably has not, would not understand that there are two types of funds that we're going to talk about now. And one is the enterprise fund, which I think all of us up here on the dais understand. This is a government department that regularly charges a fee for its services, relies on user fees for all or nearly all of its revenue. They run like a business, and they have nonprofit attributes, meaning basically the money that they make will all be put back into the function of that department in the coming year or two. Special revenue fund is a fund that simply stores funds for a specific purpose and documents transfers in and out of that fund. So we'll start off with enterprise funds now. Here's the airport. This is one of those busy slides I was telling you about that there's a lot of stuff on this slide. On the left, the projected revenue. On the right, projected expenses. And I'm also showing here the fund balance as of June 30th, 2016. So the airport fund balance, $6.8 million at that time. So far in 17, they have $2.2 million in capital projects budgeted, and otherwise you can see the net income of $1.9 million projected for 17. So it's an enterprise fund, operates like a business. I had to learn this. Down on the left-hand column under other concessions, and then one more where I forgot the bullet, it says car rental QTA facility. That's the quick turnaround facility that they built out there where they gas them up and service and wash them and so on to get them back on the line. Ambulance. Again, on the left, the revenue, on the right, the expenses, and there's a little bit to explain here. So the Rapid City Fire Department has been operating as the ambulance service in Rapid City for several years. Starting in the 80s, they began to supplement the private ambulance company at that time, and eventually, a number of years ago, took over the ambulance service. So they operate as an enterprise fund, the ambulance service for Rapid City and the surrounding area. So they've brought in about $4 million. They're expected to bring in $4.1 million in 2017 and expected to spend about 4.04 of that million. So here is FTE request. Now these were originally requests for 2 firefighters and 1 ambulance person. So these employees, I'm suggesting adding these employees again with 0 budget impact in 2017. But here's the catch. These new FTEs will be the start of the new fire and EMS split at the Rapid City Fire Department. They will split into an ambulance service and a fire department, not a fire department that conducts ambulance services. So that will result in 2 new job descriptions, one for paramedic, one for an EMT. We have crunched data. We know now the peak times, days, weeks, seasons for ambulance calls. By the way, 7 out of 10 calls coming in for the fire department are medical calls. So it makes perfect sense to peel some of those resources away from fire and start building a dedicated ambulance service that can handle those things. They will be specialists. They'll specialize in the EMS field. These folks will not be going to fires, not going to fire training. They will be medical technicians. And this perhaps has a cost savings of labor costs over time. We haven't had these positions graded yet. I imagine they will come in slightly lower than a firefighter paramedic would. That just stands to reason. This will also lead to a different response model. Currently, you will see on some of those medical calls that you'll have an ambulance and a tanker truck, maybe even the ladder truck going to a medical call. Those are very expensive resources, very big resources. And one of the things we need to do is protect that investment. $1 million ladder truck should be driven as little as possible for training and for some other things, but this is a kind of an upcoming concern that we're trying to deal with now. So this will allow for the efficient use of fire trucks and other fire equipment. It will reduce, I think, as importantly as anything else I'm going to say about this, this will reduce the overnight burden of EMS calls on fire personnel. So currently firefighters work a 24-hour shift. They sleep when they can in those fire stations. But due to the way our fire stations in our city is laid out, the main fire station on East Boulevard and the North Fire Station on whatever street it's called, off of East North. Oh, it's Tisch Boulevard, isn't it? Tisch Boulevard are the busiest fire stations for EMS calls. So all night long, these firefighters are up going to EMS calls, and maybe they'll get in for an hour. They'll get their stuff put away and go back out. And so this is very taxing on those human beings to work 24 hours and not have any rest during that time. So it's calling for a change, and this will be the start of that change. So the different response model is really meant to protect our fire assets and also reduce any risk to the community from driving those assets through town more than necessary. So, cemetery fund. This is a great example of a government enterprise fund. I mean, I take this budget very seriously, but I got a couple wisecracks brewing up when I see this. So this is an enterprise fund that was meant to make money, but we're projecting revenues of $231,000 in our cemeteries, and we're going to expend $317,000. So we're going to lose another $86,000 in cemeteries in 17, and we're already $166,000 in the hole. So in 17, finance will be working to convert this from an enterprise fund over to a general fund. Oh, and by the way, this includes $25,000 contribution from the general fund, just to lose only $86,000. So we will have to figure out how to administer that in the future, but it looks like it needs to be a general fund. Civic Center Fund, we have the revenues on the left, the projected expenses on the right. The big revenue sources for the Civic Center are the bed and booze tax at $4.3 million, and then concessions for $3 million. And the rest is building rental and those type of things on the revenue side. But these are the expenses, and then expenses on the right, personnel, non-personnel, and debt service. So requesting $10,161,000, projecting to earn just slightly under $600,000, with $3.9 million in the fund balance as of this summer. $460,000 currently budgeted for capital projects. Energy Plant Fund costs about $737,323 to run the energy plant, and those fees are reimbursed by the Civic Center and by the Rapid City Area School District. Fund balance is currently in the hole, but they try to break even. Meadowbrook Golf Course is another one that will appear again at the end of this presentation. We have the revenue on the left. Well, we have this whole page is revenue because there are so many things. So projected revenue of $1,195,600 in revenue. And the expenses, $1,197,778. So just looking at being a couple $1,000 under, with a fund balance of $65,000. We're going to talk more about this in a few minutes. Executive Golf Course, important to note, this also includes $25,000 general fund payment for the LaCroix Links Golf Course subsidy. Revenue on the left, expenses on the right, looking at coming in at $4,700 in the red. Parking lot and area fund. These are the revenue sources on the left, parking meters, violations, and leased parking. The personnel services on the right, those are the parking enforcement officers, and then we have non-personnel and debt service. So net income projected at $95,000 with $743,000 currently in the fund. Solid waste, disposal, and the material recycling. Revenue on the left with tipping fees, intergovernment transfer of $270,000 from the water reclamation. Water reclamation takes the solids that they have to harvest out of the sewer system out to the landfill. And those are, that's enough on that probably. But that's something that used to be acceptable to cast out into the field and just let the sun and the wind and the whatever take care of it, and now all of that has to be raked out of there and taken to the landfill, so there's a fee that they have charged for that. So $6,024,000 in revenue, $5.4 million roughly in the requested budget for income of $590,000. Fund balance at $9.2 million, and about $4.95 million in capital projects proposed for 2017, and that will be to cap one of the cells out at the landfill, to expand the gas collection system in 3 of the cells, and to build 2 new cells. So a lot going on out there. Solid waste collection. These are the garbage trucks and everything related to them. Projected revenue $4.5 million. The budget of $2.3 million, so a net income of $1.9. Fund balance is $4.6. So there is a transfer here from the landfill, and that is due to the space savings that the yard waste program has created. Back in the day, when all the yard waste was taken out to the dump, they were using up that land resource much faster. Now it's a significant benefit to have the recycling center out there for yard waste and the pickup sites and that sort of thing. So it's a space savings and cost savings for them. Solid waste collection is requesting a solid waste mechanic. The new specialized trucks and the current workload capacity of the equipment maintenance group tells them that they, in order to stay up and running with minimal downtime on those new trucks, that they are going to need a factory-trained mechanic to be on site to service those things. So that's $40,000 to the enterprise fund. Stormwater fund is the drainage assessment at $2.243 million. The projected expenses in 17 is $882,000. Net income of $1.36 million. And in 17 they have $1.385 million in capital projects budgeted so far. And the capital projects are pipes, culverts, things of that nature to from the stormwater sources to get to Omaha Street, across Omaha Street and onto Rapid Creek, and there could be more. Transportation Terminal Fund, another one of those that's very interesting. I just learned that we have a Transportation Terminal Fund. That's an enterprise fund. That is the Transportation Terminal building, which was donated to the City of Rapid City years ago. We make $11,300 there, not counting the $25,000 payment from the general fund. So the total projected revenue is $36,852, and we're going to spend $103,693. So we're going to lose $66,000. So I'm told that there was a day when there were more rentals. There was a restaurant or two in there over time. I remember when Family's Sub Shop was there, and unfortunately we have used some of that space for city offices and therefore taken that off of the income sheet. But fund balance is in the hole, and our projected loss is $66,000. Water Reclamation Fund. The sewer user fees are expected to bring in $11,767,985, and the projected expenses are $7,348,153. Looking at a net income of $4.4 million, fund balance of $1.2 million, and transfer from utility support of $7 million for projects. So we have in 17, $12 million worth of capital projects on tap. Those include the 38th Street reconstruction, various water reclamation plant improvements, Jolly Lane trunk sewer, and the Baldwin Street reconstruction. Water Department, water user fees, $14.6 million, total revenue of nearly $15.4 million, and the expenses expected to be $7,353,000 for a net income of $8 million. Fund balance has $4 million and $9,900,000 in capital projects budgeted, which includes the Anamosa Street reconstruction, Baldwin Street, Mount Rushmore Road Phase 3, Jackson and West Main intersection reconstruction. So this part's interesting. Water Department is asking for 3 new water maintenance employees and some equipment to put them to work. From 1972, maintenance employees have risen from 4 to 6 in 44 years. During that same time, the water accounts have gone from 12,000 to 23,000. The miles of pipe have gone from 199 to 436. The number of hydrants gone from 825 to 4,298. And the number of water valves from 2,105 to 11,272. So they have experienced a pretty significant delay in performing services and also have been contracting out many of the repairs that they used to do themselves. So they're asking for these employees to take some of that service back and increase customer service. The Water Department has a desire to take responsibility of the water service pipe from the main to the metering box at the property line. Currently, that is the homeowner's responsibility. So if your water service pipe breaks near the middle of the street, you are responsible for trenching out there, digging up your street, fixing all of that, paying for all of it. And of course, you can't do that yourself. We have about 30 of these type of failures a year in Rapid City. So they're $5,000, $10,000 issues that water maintenance would like to take off the taxpayers' hands and take responsibility for those. This is a significant step toward doing that, and we'll have to hear more about that plan as time goes on. So here are the special revenue funds. Remember, these are just funds that hold money and document transfers in and out. So this is a community development block grant. We get a grant every year from the federal government. We expect it to be $431,000. We expect to spend all of that, some on personnel services and on non-personnel services, which include grants. So the requested budget matches the amount of the expected grant. And there's a fund balance currently of $29,976, which is likely someone who's been given a grant award which has not spent the money. Capital Improvements Fund. I know I won't have to tell you to pay attention to this one, but we're going to talk about that again at the end of the presentation, which is exactly in 17 more of these wonderful slides. So the 2007 projected revenue, all things considered, $16.5 million. Projected expenses are listed here. Just note where this money is dedicated from CIP. Note who's getting the money, because I'll bring that up again. So the requested budget, $16,998,477 for a net loss of $413,000, but with a fund balance of $24 million. Okay, Vision Fund. Projected revenue on the left, projected expenses on the right. for a net income of $12.9 million and a fund balance of $13,373,000. RSVP fund. The RSVP grant is projected to be $46,000, leaving $70,000 of this program unfunded. $30,000 is expected to come from the general fund and another $40,000 from donations, and these are literally bake sales and things of that nature. Total revenue of $116,000. They have a projected budget of $117,000, and they're in the hole by over $14,000 at this moment. We'll talk about this later. My list of things we're talking about later is getting bigger. The Erosion Sediment Fund, which is part of the Clean Water Act. We are required by the federal government to have a process in place to regulate erosion control and to trap and keep dirty water from going into other downstream water sources. This is especially important at construction sites and grading and so on. And this is the hay bales and the little black tubes full of stuff that you see at construction sites and blocking this water from going into storm sewers and so on before it's filtered out. And it's funded by permit fees. So we have one employee who takes care of this. The Hazard Mitigation Fund is again a federal grant, which is expected to be $370,000. This is for the reduction of fire fuel around homes in Rapid City. The fire programs, the FireWise program and things of that nature are related to this. Occupancy Tax Fund. The occupancy tax is a $2 per night charge for hotels that have over 50 rooms. So the projected revenue there, $1,669,990. Projected expenses are the same, but it has a fund balance of $236,779. The Downtown Bid Fund is a special assessment, $180,808. The penalties and interest are people who pay late, and the city gets those. 99% of this goes to Destination Rapid City. They are the chosen administrator of this fund. It's for downtown improvements, tree grates and lighting and other such things for downtown. They have no personnel costs. All the costs go for downtown improvement, and a fund balance of $12,500. The Repair and Demolition Fund. This is another interesting one. The $55,000 is an estimate of the buildings that we will perhaps demolish in 2017, then assess back to the property owner, and then get paid for that, and we think it should total around $55,000. It's a complete estimate based on the past. We demolished a couple buildings this last year that were very expensive, and we we're either at that amount or over it by now, but there's a fund balance of $135,000. Surplus funds. What would a budget presentation be without some talk about surplus funds? The 2015 fund balance was $18,319,379, and here's how that breaks down. $5 million plus of that are owed to the CIP fund for surface transportation project. $7,950,000 are the amount we're required to keep in reserves per city ordinance. $3,528,000 is designated to balance the 2016 budget, and $1,761,918 is remaining undesignated cash on hand. Oh, and I should add the general fund balance. The general fund balance today, well, as of June 30th, was $15,145,000. Not in the reserve, but in the general fund balance. Okay, now let's talk for a couple minutes about priority-based budgeting. Going into priority-based budgeting, I have some goals. I and the staff have some goals. And that is to understand and to bring about understanding of where our money is and where it goes. That is harder than it sounds. I stared for months at a 5,000-line spreadsheet trying to understand this and still having things revealed or light bulbs still coming on today as I'm finishing up this presentation. It is very complicated. It is largely in finance officer language, which doesn't help most of us, but it's very complicated. So I believe we need to demystify and we need to break down the language barrier. We need to be able to explain the process or simplify the process because it's the people that we need to explain this to. If we work real hard, we could get all 10 council people and me to understand exactly what's going on, but I don't think that's very helpful. I think what's helpful is bringing about understanding in the community. And people who don't pay as much attention to it as we should are going to need to understand it. So that's a pretty big challenge, and that's a goal of mine, to bring about that understanding. Next, to clarify the difference between financial accounting and financial accountability. And I think priority-based budgeting is the right vehicle for that. I think we're all going to get to see. You, me, and the whole community is going to get to see how this works. We need to use data to help with decision making. So much of the requested budget that I took out had to do with wild guesses on what we think we might spend at a later time with some padding because there's no real way to know and so on and so forth. We have a lack of data management, lack of data analysis going on, and I think that's leading to some sloppy procedures. I'm not talking about in the finance office, I'm talking about in the entire organization. So I want to sharpen that up. Priority-based budgeting is a tool to defund low priority programs. Everyone knows the government is good at starting things up, but we are terrible at shutting things down. I think because we don't want to feel bad. I think because we lack the knowledge or the confidence that we're doing the right thing. But we need a tool to help us do this, and the priority-based budgeting is the right tool. This is the same tool which will be used to appropriately fund high-priority programs. And I've told this story, and it's really a good story because most of us can identify with it. So you feel like you don't have enough money to go out to the movies and eat dinner out once a week like you'd like to, and because you don't make enough money and because your house payment's too high and so on and so forth. But when you examine, you find out that you got a $40 a week cigarette habit and you're subscribed to Netflix and every other online thing, and you've got all this money going somewhere, but it's not going to the one thing you want. So you say, I don't have the money for it. Well, that's not entirely true. You have prioritized it so that you don't have the money. And the city is in the same exact boat. We are going to find out that these programs are underfunded, these great programs that are the highest priority, underfunded. So the logical mind says, well, we need to get some more cash from the taxpayer then, because we got to have funding. Well, I submit that we already have the cash. And we need to shut down some of the things that we have started up in the past, and we need to reconfigure as an organization. And I'll show you the urgent need for that in a slide or two from now, but we have to be able to do better. So to share clear data and details with the public, I mean, we've tried. Probably every mayor, every council, everybody has tried, but really I don't think we know how to do that. I think we have to learn how to do it, and then I think we have to commit to doing it, because if the devil's in the details, then no one will ever see the devil around here, because we have too many details and too many nooks and crannies, and I'm not saying it's corruption, I'm saying it's big and clunky and does not give access to the typical consumer. And efficiency and accountability to avoid the threat of higher taxes. I believe any one of us, if we wanted to, could come in and make an argument for raising a tax or for adding a new tax or so on because we need that funding. But we should not do that. We should not consider that until we've looked in our own pockets first, and I think we're on the right track. So here's how the implementation of priority-based budgeting is going right now. We're in the first year of implementation. The program identification process is complete. We have named all of the programs. There are hundreds of programs that have been identified within the city that will go into this system. The program scoring and prioritization process is ongoing. That's in progress right now. The program cost allocation is in progress. We are largely done with allocating personnel costs to these programs, and then when we're done with that, we will start assigning non-personnel costs to these programs. So we can truly find the right cost of doing business in that particular program. The priority-based budgeting philosophy is currently settling in, or I put here uploading, into city departments. We are getting used to it. We are starting to think more along the lines of a program budget rather than a line item budget. So here's a real life example. There's a department that at the end of June had used 65% of a specific line item that really should be stretched out over 12 months. So 65% of that line item was gone when 50% of the year was gone. So we see the funds are going to run dry before the end of the year. So I bring that to the department director's attention. We have a little conversation about it and so on and so forth. And in the line item budget thinking, I feel like I've done my job. The department director will go back and try to fix something so that they don't expend all those funds. But that lacks the priority, or that lacks the program budgeting mindset. And that is, of that fund, which function are you spending that overtime on? And does that signal an underfunding issue? Does it signal a staffing issue within that program? We don't, there's so many lines and so much routine business, I don't think we really let ourselves think that way. So the idea here is to get ourselves in the program budget mindset. So the second year of implementation is the big year. When 2018 comes, we'll have a year of real life priority budgeting data under our belts. We'll have the year of data here from the programs we develop. We'll go back and score it, but I don't think that's going to be as valuable as going through 2017 and getting this experience of assigning those costs and creating those programs. And so then we'll get to see how the prioritizing these programs will influence the desired results. So this is such a foreign concept that I had trouble just composing a sentence about it. But we are in the future, rather than say, my department is short and I need some more employees, we will say, my program is suffering. And so I'm going to take a resource from a lower priority program and put into this. I may take all those resources. So we will think about the health and well-being of the program in relation to its prioritization. It will give us a whole new way of thinking and explaining about how we're going to use taxpayer money. The primary priority-based budgeting tool is the Resource Alignment Diagnostic Tool. This is the software that comes from the vendor in Denver, Colorado. This will allow us to visually compare and contrast our priority quartiles. All of our priorities will go into one of four quartiles. We'll get to see those demonstrated on the screen, how much is going into each quartile. The first quartile is the highest, the fourth quartile is the lowest priority. We'll get to see our own process and our own money differently. So this is a new lens through which to view those things. and it's an eye-opener. And ideally, certainly, I'll say, it's time to tie together the comprehensive plan and the budgeting process. That's already being done, but we need to make that so that we have a comprehensive plan pocketbook so people can carry around and know which important principle in that plan we're supporting. Now, here's some future budget-related issues. So these, from here on out, these are the things that I told you I was going to talk about later. These are some ideas, and I'll welcome your ideas as time goes on here. I think you'll need a little bit of time perhaps to think about it. If not, I'll take those ideas today, but this is something I want you to be aware of. This is our historical use of the general fund cash to balance our budget. You see here in 2007 and 8, it was high. It was nearly $4.5 million. It got as low as $400,000 in the 2011 budget, and now since 2013 has been creeping up. So from 2013 till 17, I mean, this is a trend that we cannot ignore. I think that we're in a, I don't know exactly we haven't done a lot of analysis on this, but we should understand all the conditions that led to this. Remember 2011-12 were those low budget years where we had a reduced budget, reduced spending, no raises, that sort of thing. But now we're headed up in the wrong direction again, and we're $3.5 million needed to balance the budget. So clearly, logically you would say, well, we're spending too much. And, well, certainly that's true under the circumstances, but I submit to you that this is a demonstration of our revenue not keeping, our increase in revenue not keeping up with the increase in spending. Some of the increase in spending is to some extent beyond our control with the price of goods and services and price of labor and that sort of thing. But so we should not be focusing solely on spending. We should also be focusing on revenue, how to make the best of the revenue streams that we have, how to get our sales tax revenue to match the trends that are being set by the rest of the state, and so on. We've got to do something better. So this is important. This is concern. This is a concern. Certainly we've been there before. Certainly we don't want to keep going until we go off this chart. This is the wrong way to run a budget. This is the city's example of the federal budget, or the federal borrowing money to balance the budget. So something to be aware of. So here's some ideas. I want to appoint, I know another committee, but I want to appoint a committee made up of some council members and some local business folks, perhaps even some academics, to evaluate the government efficiency on some specific things, and I'll go through them and I'll tell you exactly why I think this is important on each one of them. RSVP. One of the prime issues with priority-based budgeting is that part of the evaluation is, does someone else provide this service? Does the government really need to be providing it, or can it be provided by someone else? And if the answer is yes, then we should be looking for a way out. Now, RSVP is a deeply rooted program in Rapid City. They put in thousands and thousands of volunteer hours. And when it started, I imagine this was the only volunteer coordination going on. And it's funded in part by the federal government. Well, today it is not the only game in town. RSVP is one of the many volunteer coordination groups in our area. So we should evaluate it. So I'm telling you this, I'm just being upfront and honest. My gut feeling says that we should look for a way to back out of RSVP, transfer this program, make this program available to someone like the 211 helpline. I am aware that the city of Sioux Falls recently did just that last year. 211 now runs the RSVP program. They get the RSVP grant and they get a stipend, a smaller stipend from the city of Sioux Falls, and so Sioux Falls is out of the volunteer coordination business. We should evaluate that, but I lack the confidence and the commitment at this point on this particular program to make that call alone. I don't think it would I don't think it would be the right tone. I think this is more important to be done unilaterally, and we have some time. The current grant that we're under doesn't run out until March. So I want some help evaluating these things on this list. The next one, the golf courses. I'm not sure we should be in the golf course business, but I say that, and you should know that I golf once or twice a year in a scramble tournament where it doesn't matter. I can't hurt anybody unless I hit them, but I'm not a golfer. So I say that, but I lack the business sense. I am going just on a gut feeling that I think that there's no advantage to us or anyone else that the city is in the golf course business. So I need help evaluating whether or not we should continue the arrangement we have. I think that's fair. My gut feeling shouldn't be allowed to lead to these dramatic changes, especially when we have time. The Journey Museum. Here's the issue with the Journey Museum. We have this resource here in Rapid City. This resource showed up 20 years ago. It was billed at that time as a tourist attraction. Today it is not operated as a tourist attraction. Based on that and 100 other things that have happened over the last 20 years, the Journey Museum does not have Rapid City's support. It doesn't have the community support that it needs, doesn't have the City of Rapid City's support that it needs. And so rather than continue for another 20 years grumbling about it and them wishing they had more money and us wishing we didn't have to pay them and all these things, we should just be able to have a kind of an objective business analysis to help us understand how we feel about the Journey Museum. Because one of the options is we should get on board with the Journey Museum. We should stop resenting what was said 20 years ago and have a different attitude. Or one of the options might be is we decide we don't want to be in the museum business. We cut it loose, let them fend for themselves. But what I don't think should be an option is doing what we're doing right now for the next 20 years. They got an aging building over there. They're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in upgrades and repairs because they've done none of those things in the last 20 years. And secretly, I think we point fingers at whose fault it is, and it's the other person's fault. So I think it would be fair to them and fair to us to get a different type of analysis. Same with the Humane Society. I have voiced my opinions about funding the Humane Society and what I think the right thing is. That has earned me nothing but a place on the bathroom wall somewhere and a bad name. I mean, as passionate as animal lovers are, and I'm a dog lover, as passionate as animal lovers are, if you say, I think we are funding you too much, you are now someone who hates animals. So I have become difficult to deal with. I think the Humane Society has become difficult to deal with. I am not going to be involved in their contract negotiations this year. That's going to be handled by the finance officer and the city attorney. I acknowledge I can rub people the wrong way. But I'm not sure that we understand, agree with, or appreciate the relationship and the responsibility that we have to the Humane Society, the organization, and all of that. And I think I could never make a decision on that on my own and have any credibility with the animal lovers in Rapid City. So I think we need an outside look that could help us understand. The Dolphin Arts, I think, is another one. We had this glitch in the budget last year where the executive director walked out of here thinking everything was fine, found out there was going to be less money coming their way because of the way a contract was written and so on and so forth. And we have this kind of this, we are friendly, but I don't know that we're friends, the city and the arts. No, I'm friends with everyone. But I don't, you know what I mean? Our relationship needs to be assessed. It needs to be assessed to figure out What is our responsibility here to ourselves and each other and so on? And I think in doing that, we might come around to appreciate each other more and understand what we should be doing. It's a hard sell to say, hey, we couldn't, on one hand, we couldn't balance our own budget here. We had to take $3.5 million out of the bank to do it, but we should upgrade the spending in the arts. Well, to the typical person, the non-arts person, they're going to see that as a waste of money. When they talk to us about it, I'm not sure we have the right answers, because I don't think we're equipped to know what the right answers are. I just think it's time for us to have an intervention with each other on all these types of things, figure each other out and come to some understanding. Because I think we're doing the arts and the doll and the organization a disservice by chugging along the way we are. And we all deserve better than that. And finally, I think the same thing exists with the public library. We have a $3 million public library with 38.5 people, 38.5 full-time employees. This is a city department. We should know exactly what's going on here. We should know and buy into the mission. We should all be on the same page, but state law mandates a library board to oversee that. You could ask what the value is of a library to everyone in this room, and you come up with a whole bunch of different answers, and you could go over to the library board and ask them and get a whole new set of different answers. So I don't think we understand or appreciate what it is we have, what we should be doing, but I'm pretty sure we can't let it go the way it's going right now. We are not benefiting by doing so, neither the library or us. I just don't think we understand each other enough. And I also don't think we could do that by going to more meetings with them. I think we need to really be able, and especially in order to get the library and some of these other things into the priority-based budgeting system, we have to understand more. So I think we need to appoint this committee of people that can conduct a couple of these evaluations and learn what we can learn. I think that's I think that's more fair than going forward another year doing things the same way as always. More future budget-related issues. We need to smooth out the budgeting of major equipment and other capital expenses. Now, this sounds really easy. And I don't know why the one department budgeted zero for equipment in 2016, but budgeted every year. But you can predict when equipment is likely to fail, when vehicles will have to be replaced, when the bulldozer is going to need a new track or whatever. Those type of things are predictable. So that amount of money can be set aside kind of on a balanced budgeting system that will avoid these unpredictable peaks and valleys that tend to cause a lot of confusion with the budget. We need to make budgeting a 12-month cycle. Now, a year later, I can tell you from experience, committing first 10%, 20%, 50%, and 100% of all my time to the budget for the CEO of a large organization to be personally doing the budget because I'm personally accountable for it is too much and too little at the same time. I don't think we're doing a good job. This is nothing against me, certainly not a disrespect to any former mayors, but mayors here in Rapid City have a lot to do, and they cannot commit the time and resources and energy to the budget. I also don't think the finance office, the way they're built, responsible for financial accounting, data collection, reporting, and so on, they are not capable and under the current arrangement of being what we need to help us make this a 12-month budget cycle. The employee retirement incentive is a short-term solution. I think it would be very interesting to see 25, 30, 40 city employees take advantage of a 3-month incentive to take the retirement that they've already become eligible for, and hiring their replacements at virtually 50% for some of these positions. 50% of what we're paying now will be a financial win. Government is one of the only organizations that does not routinely examine labor costs. I feel bad saying that because I think the message is going to get out to city employees that we're looking to slash wages or something of that nature. But employees are the most expensive. While they're the most valued, they are the most expensive resource the city has. And we have to look at labor costs. So if 3 months will get some of them to take advantage of it, we'll save money. Jeff Barbier has the math. He'll have it by the next council meeting. He'll be able to explain the payback, but essentially in the worst case scenario, the 3-month, everyone takes the 3-month incentive to leave. We'll recover all those costs in a year. And then we'll be on the savings. And I just want to say, this is meant for a one-time window. One 90-day window, not an annual thing, not a thing every 2 or 5 years. I think we're in a unique position where we have 92 city employees who currently qualify for retirement and are not taking it. Clearly, we're a great place to work, but if they take that benefit, we will gain financially. I recommend this. But this will be a separate issue, and I'll bring it sometime with plenty of notice. But I think we need to repeal or revise the ordinance that controls the Community Investment Committee and how that money is given out. The $102,000 plus community development block grants that are given out by the Investment Committee are given out after the budget cycle. So essentially, I'm asking you to approve $102,000 and we don't know where it's going. Somebody in October will tell us where it's going. And I think that's a little backwards. There's some restrictions in this ordinance that was created to protect this process, but there's some restrictions in there that allow us to make it better, or that don't allow us to make it better. So I would ask us to take a look at that and maybe repeal or revise it. Next, I would also ask to repeal or revise the ordinance mandating the amount of money in the surplus fund. Again, an ordinance created to provide certain protections. But as you saw from the previous slide, this ordinance is mandating that we have $7.9 million in reserves. So the question becomes, what will $7.9 million do for us in the event of a financial disaster? Or in the event of a natural disaster? Or what is the purpose for it? I'm asking you that. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just asking because I think that we all should be asking that. What good is $7.9 million as opposed to $7 million, as opposed to $5 million, as opposed to $12 million? I'm not sure. But I think we should look at that at a later time, consider just taking some of those restrictions off, because I don't think they're helping anything. Okay, and here's another one. I think we need a budget analyst, a full-time budget analyst in Rapid City to get control of this budget, the budget issues that we have. I'm not talking mechanically about paying bills or anything that happens in the finance office, but we have no real way to measure budget performance. Budget performance should be measured at least monthly, maybe bi-weekly. Budget performance, including budgeting for the future, really is something we don't do. We commit the mayor and staff to punch a bunch of keys and get a budget put together, and we're not sure if it's any better than anybody's past budget. So I'm requesting this for the mayor's office because I think this is going to be the primary support for council in the 11 departments and will become the point person for the priority-based budgeting process. We have got to make budgeting year-round. So we do not have a job description. We have not run it through grading. I took a wild guess and thought it might be in the $60,000 range. It could be 40. It could be, who knows what it could be, but We have no homework done on that as far as the job description goes. But I think that could be a position that pays for itself in a couple of months. Every time we have a council meeting and there's a bill list, it's $9 million, $10 million. A lot of money passes through City Hall, and I think we can do better. So how do we add funds for infrastructure needs? I bet if we had a way to analyze it, all of us, including me, have said the word infrastructure or roads or sewer or water as one of our priorities in the last week or two, certainly in the last year or two. Infrastructure is a big deal. It's a very big deal. So how do we get it without going back to the taxpayers and asking for more? Well, I think we can look in our own pockets, and one of the things that I'm suggesting sounds a little flippant, but I'm being totally serious about it. We need to see how we can get everyone's fingers out of the CIP. IT is in there for $226,000. That could signal a funding problem or a priority problem in IT. Not a deprioritizing of the CIP projects, but a priority problem in IT. Fire vehicles, $511,000 annually for fire vehicles. If we could only start each year by adding $100,000 to the general fund for fire vehicles and start bleeding down the CIP, the fire department's dependence or IT's dependence on the CIP, and start building up their own sustainability. Interdepartmental charges, which goes to primarily finance, public works, I think, attorney, for managing the CIP projects. There's a lot of time and effort put into those things, and so we budget $1.4 million out of CIP for that. Parks and Recreation for $925,000. There has to be a way to figure out how to get the money to prioritize differently, to get some of this money back into CIP where it belongs. And I think we have to stop this warp thinking. I say this as the rookie among you in warps. I know that you folks have handled more warps than I've seen or heard about in the last year. But this warp mentality, a waiver of right to protest, giving a developer an exception for a road improvement, for example, and then the developer sells the property, and we have the ability to assess back that road to all the businesses or all the homes in that area. But the truth of the matter is we don't do that. We don't do it. We almost never do it. Do it very rarely. So what that means is in 5 or 10 years, we're going to stick the road improvements on the taxpayer when a developer has enjoyed the money up front. And the bad news is, 5 or 10 years ago, some council gave those exceptions, and we're paying for it today. I have no way today of accurately measuring this, but I would be surprised if it's less than $1 million a year. So we have to we have to figure out a different way to deal with those exceptions and dealing with those road improvements so that councils 5 and 10 years from now are not having to commit taxpayer money to it. And here's an idea with a question mark. Could we, if 2 engineering techs will save $400,000, does that mean 2 more will save another $400,000? Dale Tech's going to do the math. That money will go directly back into those CIP projects. I think we should draft a 5-year infrastructure ramp-up plan and commit to it. We should study it, meet about it, and we should say, every year from now for the next 5 years, we want to commit X $100,000 or X million additional into infrastructure, so that in 5 years we have 5 times that. So maybe that's $500,000. And in making a 2-mile long road, $500,000 doesn't go very far. But if it was $500,000 that we ramp up every year for 5 years, then in 5 years we've got $2.5 million. If it was $1 million, we have $5 million more dollars. It is estimated, without sufficient data to back it up, it's estimated that we're in excess of $10 million short on keeping up with the demands of the failing infrastructure in this town. Citizen sent me a picture of a road that's crumbling up. It's nearly a gravel road again. And he says, what can we do to get this fixed? Well, I looked, and it's not on the 5-year plan. And it's in the same category as 50 to 70 other streets in Rapid City that would be better off if they were gravel. And we can't have them on the plan. So we need to do something. We are millions behind every year. I think we all know this. I predict this will catch up to us and will dominate the future budget and the city, overall priorities of the city. If we had half a dozen water main failures in a month, we would feel this pinch. Those water mains would have been built in the 1920s or 30s, and we knew they were going to fail. We just didn't have the money to get them on the list. So all of these things are dependent on recognizing, articulating, and committing to our priorities. There are tough decisions ahead, and we all have to be ready together to tackle it. So, budget feedback. Here's how I would like to handle it. I think this would be an efficient way to handle it, but obviously, at this point, the budget is yours. It's your decision. I will take your easy and obvious questions now. The other questions, the ones requiring more analysis, something that I simply don't know, if you would submit those to me in writing, I will get the answers back to you and I will deliver them publicly at your budget hearing. And I will answer as many questions as you have. So now I have a copy of the presentation that I just gave you. We're going to hand that out to council and make those available to the media, and there might be a couple more left over. It is kind of lengthy. I'm a little embarrassed about that, but I'd stand for questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple housekeeping things. I got a good news, bad news story for you here, Mayor. It's 8:22. You've gone 2 hours, and you wouldn't let us interrupt you. We have to start over because we didn't have a roll call. So I guess Heidi, if I could, I forgot to ask, do we have to do roll call, or can you acknowledge those present? Thank you. Sorry, and I apologize to the public for that. But now you can start over. Yeah, we have 2 alder women absent tonight. The second thing I guess I'd like to state is that going forward, in the past, we've had numerous budget hearings where we brought in department directors. It's this mayor's position that this is his budget. He's communicated already with the department directors, and in doing so, he wants to answer the questions. Mr. Mayor, what I'm wondering is, would you like, we could do is start at one end and give each council person 5 minutes. And that would chew up about 40 minutes, and then any other questions could be in writing, or how would you like to do it?
I have time. Whatever you choose is fine with me.
Okay. But the end goal tonight is twofold. One, to end up with a motion to at least acknowledge the mayor's budget, and number 2 is to set up 1 and maybe 2 dates in the future where we would publicly answer any written questions that we'd have for the mayor, and hopefully that next meeting would be also act as the first reading of the budget. So with that said, do we want to put a 5-minute timer on these questions for each alderman, or do you want to just go?
It's up to you.
Go. All right, so we'll go to Alderman Jerry Wright.
At this time, I have no questions. I would make a motion to acknowledge receipt of the budget from the mayor.
Motion and a second to acknowledge. Any questions at this time regarding the motion? All right. All those, I see nobody on the queue. All those in favor for acknowledging the budget, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same side. Motion passes. Alderwoman Amanda Scott.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we set the next budget hearing date for Wednesday, August 24th. At 6:30.
We have a motion and a second to set the next budget hearing for August 24th. I would assume then, Mr. Mayor, that's about approximately 2 weeks from today. So if you'd like to have the written questions from the council people, but by the 16th, partway through, or?
Correct, but I will commit myself and other staff to answer them up to the day before if there's not a great amount of research required with those questions. I will work as hard as I can to get them all answered.
All right, sorry, I don't think I followed rules here. Anyway, we have a motion and a second on the floor for August 24th. Any further discussion for that date?
Pauline wants you to make it at 5:30.
August 24th at 5:30 PM?
That's the request from the finance officer.
I'll withdraw my motion then.
You can't do that.
Can't be there, okay.
Okay, then she'll go with 6:30. Will that help you get there, Amanda, Amanda?
Yeah, you,
6:30, time being set for 6:30.
Okay.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? All right, does any, Alderwoman Scott.
thank you. Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd like to just clarify. So as council members start sending you these questions, because right now after listening to you, it's going to take me a while before I can even phrase a question tonight.
Yep.
And I'm trying right now. So as you answer the questions to the council, you're going to provide answers if they're easy through a communication of email and then have the summary of them on the agenda, attached to the agenda on Wednesday, August 24th? Or how do you foresee these answers being made available to the public as well as the city council members?
Well, I think we should do whatever's easiest and most practical, so I can return answers to you as soon as I have them, and I can come here and summarize those questions and answers for the public. Unless you have a better idea, I am flexible, and I will do whatever seems most appropriate.
Well, I'm just thinking, like most items on our agenda, if you can provide the answers to the city council ahead of time, that's great, but then to be able to have those answers in a memo format that's attached to the agenda, so that way it would be a public record and available to the public, I would request that we handle it that way.
Absolutely, that's perfect.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. I see no Alderman Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Alderman Estes. So, Mayor, one question I had was regarding the priority-based budgeting with this particular budget. So, just to make sure that I'm clear, the 2017 budget is based on the priorities that you set, even though you haven't completed the scoring of the priorities yet. Is that what I'm to believe?
I can't really say that because of the timing of the implementation and the requirements to get this budget. This budget is largely a line item budget with an eye toward the comprehensive plan, but the programs have been developed late in the budget season, so we do not have all the program costs, therefore we cannot prioritize each program at this point.
All right, that was my next question, was if we had a list of the programs, we kind of start looking at it in that lens. When do you expect that we might see a program list?
I think the program list will not be that far out. We may even have, we're very close to it. The costing, I believe we're shooting for was it a November? November 1st deadline for all the cost allocations to those programs. That's a very tedious task, but so the program list can be sooner.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If none, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I think we're there. Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you.